The stagecoach rolls into Crestfall on a Thursday afternoon in late September of 1873, trailing a curtain of red dust that hangs in the still air long after the wheels stop turning. Nora Voss is the last passenger off. She steps down onto the unpainted boards of the station platform with a worn leather travelling bag in one hand and the careful posture of a woman who has rehearsed this moment enough times to keep her face from showing what her stomach is doing. The sun is brutal here in a way that St. Louis never prepared her for, flat and direct, pressing down on the rooftops and the dry earth without apology. The smell is different too, dust and animal and something sharp underneath, like the land itself is skeptical of newcomers. She straightens her hat and looks down the length of Crestfall's main road. It is not what she imagined. She is not sure what she imagined exactly, but it was not this. A single dirt road flanked by buildings that seem to lean slightly away from each other. A water trough with a crack running up its side. A general store with sun-bleached lettering and a collection of men outside the feed merchant who have already stopped what they were doing to look at her. Nora looks back at them without flinching. Then she looks for Roy Pelham. He is not there. She waits on the platform with her bag at her feet. The stagecoach driver unloads the remaining cargo and leaves without ceremony. The men outside the feed merchant go back to talking, though she can feel the occasional glance sliding her way like a slow hand of cards. The sun moves. The dust settles. Roy Pelham does not appear. An hour passes. Then most of another. She has read his letters so many times the paper had gone soft at the folds. A practical man, he had written. A hard-working man. A man who needed a capable woman to help run a modest property east of town. The letters were plain and businesslike, and she had liked that about them. She had written back in the same manner, no poetry, no pretending. Just the facts of who she was, what she could do, and what she needed in return. A roof, stability, enough income to send something back to St. Louis, where her father Gareth was managing a broken hand and a bankrupt smithy, and the particular quiet of a man who had stopped expecting things to improve. Roy Pelham finally appears at the far end of the road. He is not what the letters suggested. He moves with the unsteady deliberateness of a man who has been drinking since mid-morning, and there is a quality to his expression, not quite guilt, not quite apology, that Nora recognizes immediately as the face of someone who has already decided something and is now only performing the announcement of it. She stands straighter. Her hands do not move. He stops 6 feet from the platform. He looks at her the way a man looks at a bill he does not intend to pay. The men from the feed merchant have gone quiet again. On the porch of the building across the street, 3 men in better clothes have turned to watch. One of them, older, broad-shouldered, with the particular stillness of a man accustomed to being the heaviest presence in any room. He has a faint smile on his face that has nothing warm in it. Pelham clears his throat. "You're not what I had in mind," he says. His voice is loud enough that it carries. Nora holds his gaze. "Then you should have been more specific in your correspondence." A beat of silence. Someone near the feed merchant lets out a short sound that is not quite a laugh. Pelham's jaw tightens. Whatever he came here with the intention of saying, he says it. A rambling, liquor-blunted speech about expectations and practicalities, and the simple fact that he has changed his mind. He says it loudly. He says it in the middle of the main road of Crestfall, with half the town watching. When he is finished, he turns and walks back the way he came without waiting for her to respond. Nora does not move for a long moment. The dust from his boots drifts sideways in the faint afternoon wind. The man with the expensive stillness on the porch across the street, the one with the smile that costs nothing, watches her with an attention that feels less like sympathy and more like assessment. She does not know his name yet. She files his face away. She picks up her bag. The town does not offer her any particular comfort. The women who pass keep their eyes forward in the particular way of people who have witnessed an embarrassment and are choosing not to associate themselves with it. A girl no older than 12 stares openly from the doorway of the seamstress shop before being pulled inside. The man at the front of the general store pretends to arrange a display of tins that does not need arranging. Nora walks to the hotel at the end of the road. It is a narrow building with a porch that sags on one side and a sign that has lost most of its paint. Inside, the air smells of pine resin and old wood, and the particular mustiness of a building that has absorbed too many summers. The man behind the desk is thin and grey-haired, with the watchful eyes of someone who has heard everything at least twice. She sets her bag on the floor and explains her situation plainly. The arrangement has fallen through. She has limited funds. She needs a room while she determines her options. He listens. He looks at her for a moment with an expression she cannot entirely read. Then he says that a room has already been arranged. By whom? She asks. A standing arrangement, he says. For 1 week. She looks at him steadily. He does not elaborate. There is something in his manner that suggests the question of who arranged it is one he considers already answered, as though the identity of the person is, to him, self-evident, as though she should already know. She does not push. She takes the key. The room is small and plain and clean. The window looks out onto the side alley and then onto the hard, flat land beyond the edge of town, stretching brown and amber toward the low hills in the distance. She sets her bag on the cot and sits beside it and allows herself exactly the amount of time it takes to breathe slowly 3 times. Then she opens the bag and takes out the small envelope that holds the last of her money, counts it without expression, and puts it back. Gareth Voss is in St. Louis with a hand that will not close properly, and a smithy that closed its doors in April, and a cot in the back of a boarding house that his daughter has been paying for with money she does not have. He is 58 years old, and he raised her alone from the time she was 9, and the last letter she sent him said that everything was going to be fine. She stares at the wall above the window. Everything is not fine. But it is also not finished. Nora Voss does not operate in the territory of finished. Below, through the thin floor, she can hear the murmur of the hotel common room, boots on floorboards, a chair scraping, the low rhythm of men talking about things that have nothing to do with her, and then one voice, the desk clerk's slightly raised, saying a name in a tone she has only heard once before, about 20 minutes ago, when he told her the room was already arranged, a tone of particular and quiet deference. She moves to the door and opens it just enough. Through the crack, she can see the bottom of the staircase and the edge of the front desk. A man is standing at the counter, with his back to her. Tall, dark coat worn at the shoulders, a hat pulled low. He speaks too quietly for her to catch the words, but the clerk nods with that same careful attention, the attention of a man receiving a message from someone whose instructions he does not question. The man turns to leave and she sees his profile for half a second. He is not one of the men from the porch across the street. He is not anyone she recognized this afternoon. He has the kind of face that does not invite introduction, angular, closed, giving nothing to the casual observer. A scar runs faintly along the line of his jaw on the left side. He moves through the hotel lobby, like a man who has calculated the distance to every exit without appearing to look. He is gone before she can see anything more. She closes the door. She stands in the middle of the small room and turns the moment over carefully. The way she turns every piece of information she is given, not quickly, not with panic, but with the methodical patience of a woman who has learned that the details other people ignore are frequently the ones that matter most. The room was arranged. The clerk knew who arranged it. The man at the desk was treated with a deference that had nothing to do with his appearance and everything to do with something she does not yet have a name for. Outside, the late afternoon sun pulls the shadows long across the hard dirt road. Somewhere down the street, a door bangs in the wind. A horse shifts at its post. Crestfall settles into its early evening rhythm, as though the afternoon scene at the stagecoach platform was nothing more than a minor variation in an otherwise unremarkable day. But Nora Voss sits on the edge of a cot in a room someone paid for without telling her, and she files that man's profile away next to the face of the broad-shouldered man on the porch with the smile that cost nothing. 2 things she does not understand yet. She has always found that 2 unresolved things laid side by side eventually begin to explain each other. She will wait. The man who comes to the hotel on Friday morning is not Roy Pelham. Nora is at the small writing desk in her room, composing a letter to her father. A careful letter, the kind that carries bad news in language that does not sound like bad news. When she hears the clerk's voice downstairs, and then a second voice she does not recognize, and then her name spoken in the flat tone of someone delivering a message rather than beginning a conversation. She folds the unfinished letter, tucks it beneath the edge of the bag, and goes down. The man waiting at the base of the stairs is somewhere past 50, with a grey beard trimmed close and the sun-darkened hands of someone who has worked outside for most of his life. He holds his hat in both hands and introduces himself as the keeper of the Ironwood, a ranch 6 miles northeast of town. He says his employer is in need of a cook and a housekeeper. He says the position includes room and board. He says the arrangement was suggested by the hotel's owner, who mentioned that a capable woman had recently found herself without a situation. Nora listens to all of this without expression. "Who is your employer?" she asks. The man, he gives his name as Walt Briggs, says the name Eli Cade without any particular emphasis, the way a man says a name he expects to be recognized. She does not recognize it. But she thinks of a profile seen through a doorway crack, a scar along a jawline, a clerk who nodded with the deference of a man receiving instructions he did not question. She asks what the position pays beyond room and board. Walt names a figure. It is modest but real. She asks when the position begins. He says whenever she is ready. She looks at him for a moment, then at the door, then at the clerk behind the desk who is carefully not watching. "Tomorrow morning," she says. She is ready that same afternoon, but she does not say so. The Ironwood announces itself from half a mile out, and what it announces is ruin. The main fence line sags between posts that have not been reset in years. The approach road is deeply rutted, the wheel tracks old and uneven. The house itself, a 2-story structure of grey timber, stands intact, but with the hollow look of a building that has been preserved rather than lived in. A barn to the east shows its roof has been partially repaired, but the outer walls have not seen paint in at least a decade. The yard between the structures is hard-packed dirt, with no attempt at order. Nora takes all of it in from the wagon seat without comment. Walt brings the wagon to a stop near the front porch. The door opens before they reach it. Eli Cade steps out and stops at the edge of the porch. She recognizes him immediately. The profile, the height, the way he holds himself with the measured stillness of a man who does not waste movement. Up close, he is harder to read than she expected. The amber-brown eyes settle on her with the same quality as the rest of him, which is to say they give nothing away while appearing to take everything in. The scar below his jaw catches the morning light for a second. He looks at her the way a man inspects a fence line, not dismissively but practically, checking for weaknesses he will need to account for. "Miss Voss," he says. "Mr. Cade," she says. That is the entirety of the greeting. He turns and goes back inside. Walt Briggs gives her a look that she interprets as apologetic, though he covers it quickly. She picks up her bag and follows Eli through the door. Inside, he walks her through the house in under 4 minutes. Kitchen, dry storage, the small room off the back hall that will be hers. He explains what he expects. Meals at consistent hours, the supply inventory managed weekly, the main rooms kept in order. He says it with the economy of a man who has given these instructions before in his own head many times and is simply reporting them now. "The rest of the ranch is not your concern," he says at the end of it. "What counts as the rest?" she asks. He looks at her. "Everything I haven't just shown you." He leaves through the back door. She hears his boots cross the yard toward the barn, and then the yard goes quiet. Nora stands in the kitchen of the Ironwood and looks around at the space she has just been given. The kitchen is functional and completely without warmth. The shelves are organized but sparse. The single window above the basin faces west and will catch the worst of the afternoon heat. There is a small cast iron stove that looks well used, which is the first thing she has seen in this house that suggests regular occupation. She puts her bag in the back room, rolls up her sleeves, and starts on the inventory. The first week is distance with a structure to it. Eli rises before light. By the time Nora comes to the kitchen, his tin cup is rinsed and sitting upside down on the shelf, and the back door is already standing open to the cool morning air. He takes his meals at the table without conversation, eats with the focused efficiency of a man for whom eating is maintenance rather than pleasure, and returns to the land. Walt Briggs is around more than Eli, friendlier in a surface way, quick with information about the ranch's daily rhythms, which animals to watch, which parts of the fence were most in need of attention. He answers her practical questions without hesitation and volunteers details about Crestfall's social geography in a way she finds informative, but slightly too offered, like a man who wants to be seen as useful. She notes it without deciding what it means yet. On the fifth morning, she is in the barn, not because anyone asked her to be there, but because she heard one of the younger peoys speaking quickly to Walt about a calf that had gone down during the night and was refusing to stand. She finds the animal in the far stall, a young heifer, maybe 4 months, lying on her side with the labored breathing of an animal in pain. The 2 men present have already made their assessment. The heifer is done, Walt tells her. It happens. Not worth the effort. Nora crouches beside the animal without responding to that. She grew up watching her father work. Gareth Voss was a smithy by trade, but the farmers brought him animals when the animals had metal in them, or needed shoes reset, or had gotten into something that had swollen a leg or torqued a joint. She learned to read an animal's discomfort before she learned to read a balance sheet. She presses 2 fingers along the heifer's side, watches the breathing pattern, checks the eyes. Bloat. Caught early enough. She asks Walt for a specific item from the supply room. He brings it with the skeptical expression of a man humoring a request he considers pointless. She works on the heifer for the better part of an hour, quietly, methodically, with the patience of someone who has done close work under pressure before. The heifer stands before noon. She is walking back to the house when she becomes aware that she is being watched from the fence line near the east pasture. She does not look directly. She keeps walking. But the following morning, without announcement or explanation, the door to the locked outbuilding south of the barn is standing open. She does not investigate it, not yet. But she notes that it is unlocked, and she notes the timing, and she adds it to the small growing inventory of things about the Ironwood that do not quite match the appearance of the place. Roy Pelham comes to the Ironwood on a Wednesday. She is hanging the week's washing on the line beside the house when she sees him coming up the approach road on a brown mare. He is sober this time, which makes him more deliberate and in some ways more unpleasant. He ties the horse at the post and walks across the yard with the careful ease of a man who has been told what to say and has rehearsed it enough to believe it is his own idea. He stops at the edge of the yard. His hat comes off. He says he wants to apologize for the manner of his behavior at the station. He says he was not himself. He says he has been thinking about the situation and believes there may be a way to make things right. Not the original arrangement, but something else. Something that would benefit her considerably. Nora continues pulling a sheet from the basket. She drapes it over the line before she looks at him. "What kind of something?" she says. He shifts his weight. He says that a man in town, a man with considerable property and connections, has an interest in understanding the operations at the Ironwood. Nothing detailed, just the comings and goings, visitors, whether any papers or documents change hands, small observations reported occasionally. In exchange for this, Pelham says, she would receive a sum that would resolve her immediate difficulties and give her options she does not currently have. Nora looks at him for a long moment. She looks at the way he holds his hat, at the way he is not quite meeting her eyes, at the particular quality of a man delivering a message on behalf of someone who considers the messenger expendable. She thinks of the man with the expensive stillness on the porch across the street, the one with the smile that cost nothing, watching her humiliation with the attention of someone who had arranged it. She thinks of the hotel room, the arrangement, the timing. "Tell whoever sent you," she says, "that I'm not in the business of selling what doesn't belong to me." She picks up the empty washing basket. "And don't come back to this property." Pelham's expression changes, not to anger, to something thinner and less committed, the expression of a man recalibrating. He puts his hat back on, takes a breath, and says quietly that she may find her situation here less comfortable than she currently expects. He rides out without hurrying. She watches him go until the dust closes behind him on the road. Then she turns back to the washing and finishes hanging it, piece by piece, in the flat afternoon light. She knows what she has just turned down. She knows what it cost. She also knows that whatever Roy Pelham was before he walked up the approach road of the Ironwood on a Wednesday afternoon, he was not operating alone, and he was not operating out of guilt. He was sent. And the man who sent him has been watching the Ironwood, and watching her, since before she stepped off the stagecoach. She carries the empty basket back to the house. Inside, she passes the door to the locked-out building, still open from 2 days ago. Through the gap she can see shelving, clean, organized, entirely unlike the outer appearance of the structure, stacked ledgers, a crate with markings she does not recognize, and on the far wall pinned flat, a document with a seal she has seen before, on legal correspondence at her father's smithy long ago, an attorney's seal. She does not go in. She keeps walking. But that night, lying on the cot in the back room with the Texas dark pressed flat against the window, she turns over everything she has gathered in the past week, the deference of the hotel clerk, the unlocked door, the attorney's seal, the visitor who came and went without leaving a name, and she begins to understand that the ironwood is not what it looks like from the road. And Roy Pelham's employer understands that too. The cartorio in Crestfall occupies the back half of a building that also houses a notary and a land surveyor, separated from the main street by a narrow passage that smells of old paper and pine boards swelling in the heat. Nora goes on a Tuesday morning when Eli rides the north fence line and Walt takes the supply wagon into town for the weekly order. She has been thinking about the attorney's seal for 6 days. The clerk at the records desk is a small man with ink-stained fingers and the particular wariness of someone who spends his days surrounded by information other people want. She asks, plainly and without preamble, about the registered deed for the Ironwood Ranch, a property 6 miles northeast of Crestfall. She says she is employed there and has a legitimate need to understand the property's boundaries for supply and maintenance purposes. The clerk looks at her for a moment. Then he pulls the ledger. What she finds takes her a full 10 minutes to absorb. The Ironwood's registered deed lists the property under the name E.R. Cade. The acreage recorded is not the modest parcel the ranch's appearance suggests. It is 3 times larger, extending northeast along the valley floor and west into the low hills in a configuration that encompasses the primary water source feeding the entire valley. The water rights are listed separately, attached to the deed with a notation dated 1861, before the war, before whatever happened that left the ranch in apparent ruin. She reads it twice. Then she reads the acreage again, because the first number seems wrong. It is not wrong. Nora closes the ledger carefully and thanks the clerk, and walks back out through the narrow passage into the Crestfall morning. The sun is high and the street is busy with the ordinary noise of a Thursday. Wagons, voices, the rhythmic sound of work from the blacksmith 2 doors down. She walks through all of it without hearing any of it. She is thinking about deliberateness, about the sagging fence line visible from the road, the hollow look of the house, the outbuilding kept locked, interior clean and organized, entirely at odds with its exterior, the attorney who visited without leaving a name, the hotel clerk's deference, the appearance of ruin, maintained carefully by someone who knows exactly what the ranch is worth. She walks back to the ironwood with the information sitting in her chest like a stone that has not yet decided which way to fall. She waits until evening. Eli is at the table with a cold supper and a silence that has become, over the past 2 weeks, less hostile and more simply habitual, the silence of a man who has arranged his life so that words are rarely necessary. She sets his plate, sits across from him with her own, and looks at the table for a moment. Then she looks at him. "I went to the land office today," she says. He does not look up immediately. He finishes the bite he is eating. Then he sets his fork down and looks at her with that quality of attention she has come to recognize, complete, still, giving nothing away on the surface. "The deed lists water rights for the entire valley," she says, "and acreage that doesn't match what anyone looking at this ranch from the road would think it holds." A beat of silence. "You've been keeping this place looking abandoned on purpose," she says, "and someone is coming and going with legal documents. And Hargrove's man came here with an offer that only makes sense if Hargrove already knows what this land is really worth." She is not accusing. She is reporting. She lays it out the way her father taught her to account for inventory, item by item, without dramatizing the numbers because the numbers speak for themselves. What she is not expecting is the way Eli's expression shifts. It is not guilt. It is not the discomfort of a man caught in something. It is something harder and faster than that, a door closing, a decision made in the space between 1 second and the next. "That information," he says, "is not yours to collect." The words land flat and final, not loud, not cruel, but carrying the specific weight of a man who has built walls so long that he no longer distinguishes between threats and curiosity. Nora looks at him steadily. "I found out because someone is working against you and I live here," she says. "I needed to understand what I was in the middle of." "You're not in the middle of anything," he says. "You cook, you manage the house. What happens on this land beyond that porch is not your business and was never offered to you as part of this arrangement. The silence that follows is different from the ones before it. The ones before were empty. This one has edges." She stands. She picks up her plate. She sets it on the shelf by the basin and goes to her room without another word, because she has said what she came to say, and she will not repeat herself, and because the anger moving through her is the cold, clear kind that does not benefit from immediate expression. The distance reinstalls itself the following days with the particular weight of something that has been strained and reset, present everywhere, acknowledged by neither of them. Eli takes his meals without conversation. Nora provides them without commentary. The house functions, the work continues. Walt Briggs moves through the space between them with the careful neutrality of a man pretending not to notice a storm. On the fourth day, Carver arrives. She has seen him twice before, the man in the suit who comes and goes without leaving a name. This time she is in the kitchen when he arrives, and Eli takes him through to the main room without closing the door fully. She is not listening. She does not move closer. But in the way of old houses where sound travels through walls and along floorboards, she hears the word Austin, and she hears the word intimation, and she hears Eli's voice drop into a register she has not heard before, still controlled, but with something underneath it that sounds like a man managing something that has been pressing against him for a long time. She learns his name from Walt that evening, without asking directly. Carver, a lawyer from Austin. He has been here before, Walt says, with the tone of a man offering more than the question required. She thinks about that tone for a while after Walt walks away. The news moves through Crestfall the following week, with the efficiency that small towns reserve for information that will cause the most disruption. The sheriff has issued a legal intimation against the Ironwood, a challenge to the validity of the property's deed, citing an alleged irregularity in the original registration. The documents supporting the challenge were filed by a representative of the Hargrove family. She hears it first from the woman at the dry goods counter, who offers it with the cautious sympathy of someone who cannot decide whether to be sorry or satisfied. She hears it again from a farmer's wife at the post office, who says that everyone knows the Ironwood deed was always on uncertain ground, that it is sad but not surprising. Nora buys her supplies and says nothing. But she is thinking clearly now, and the picture is assembling itself without her needing to force it. Hargrove knows what the land is worth. He has known for some time, possibly as long as Eli has been rebuilding in silence. The legal challenge is not a new plan. It is the escalation of a plan that has been running quietly in the background the entire time, waiting for the right moment and the right leverage. Pelham was leverage. The espionage offer was leverage. The deed challenge is the next step. And the Ironwood, for all its hidden depth, is being squeezed by someone who has the sheriff's office and the town's ear and the patience of a man who has never had reason to hurry. That evening, Walt finds her on the side porch as she finishes the last of the mending. He sits on the step below her without being invited, which is not unusual. He says he is worried about her position here. He says that with the legal troubles mounting, and Eli being the private kind of man he is, she may find herself without a situation again through no fault of her own. He says there is no dishonor in looking after herself, in stepping back from whatever is happening here, and not letting it pull her down with it. He says it with the warmth of a man who has her interests at heart. She looks at him. He meets her gaze with the open expression of someone who has nothing to hide. "I appreciate the concern," she says. He nods satisfied and goes inside. She sits with the mending in her lap and the Texas dark coming in from the east, and she turns the conversation over carefully, the way she turns everything. Walt knew about the legal challenge. He knew about it with the ease of a man who received the information rather than gathered it. He knew she was unsettled from the confrontation with Eli. And he chose tonight, specifically tonight, to suggest she consider leaving. She thinks about the attorney's seal in the outbuilding. She thinks about the conversations Walt would have been present for. She thinks about how much a man like Hargrove would pay for information from inside the Ironwood, and what a man approaching 50, with no property of his own, might do to secure his position before the storm broke. She does not reach a conclusion yet. She is not the kind of woman who reaches conclusions before she has something more than instinct to stand on. But she stops telling Walt anything that matters, and in the morning, before Eli rides out, and before Walt hitches the wagon, she finds the courage she did not have before the confrontation and channels it somewhere more precise. She goes to the cartorio again. This time she is not looking at acreage or water rights. She is looking at the filing dates on the Hargrove challenge. She is looking at the name of the attorney who filed it. She is looking at the specific language of the irregularity claimed. She reads carefully. She reads it again. The claim hinges on a single notarial stamp that Hargrove's attorney argues was improperly administered at the time of the original deed registration in 1861. It is a narrow argument, a technical one, the kind that requires a specific counterfiling to defeat, and a counterfiling requires documentation that the original stamp was valid. That documentation would be in Austin. She puts the ledger back. She walks outside into the hard morning light. She does not have access to the documents. She does not have a lawyer. She does not have Eli's trust, which she burned or which burned itself, she is still not certain which, when she walked into that kitchen with the cartorio figures and laid them on the table without enough care for what she was walking into. But she has time. The legal process in 1873 moves slowly, and the intimation has a response window. She has something to work with. She just has to decide how much she is willing to do for a man who told her plainly that what happened on this land was none of her business. She walks back up the road toward the ironwood. The answer, when she finds it somewhere between the first bend and the second, is not about Eli Cade. It is about her father in St. Louis, and the letter she has not finished, and the fact that the only roof between her and that unfinished letter is the one belonging to a ranch that someone is trying to take apart from the outside while it is quietly being hollowed from within. That is enough of a reason. It will have to be. Carver comes back on a Monday, and this time Eli does not take him to the main room. He takes him to the kitchen. It is not an accident. Nora understands that immediately. The choice of room, the way Eli pulls out the chair across from where she is working and says her name once, quietly, in the tone of a man who has made a decision he is not going to explain at length. She sets down what she is doing. She sits. Carver places his leather case on the table and opens it without ceremony. And for the next hour, in the flat morning light of the ironwood kitchen, Nora Voss learns what she has been living in the middle of. The ironwood was built by Eli's father, Robert Cade, in 1858. The water rights were secured legally and properly in 1861, 3 months before Robert Cade rode east with a regiment and did not come back. The official record lists his death as a casualty of engagement near the Red River crossing in the spring of 1864. The detail that the official record does not address, the detail that Eli has been sitting with for 9 years, is that Robert Cade was not a fighting man, he was a surveyor, a man whose value to any military operation was in what he knew about land and water and the geography of the Texas interior. Men like that did not typically end up in front-line engagements. Eli was 23 when he came back to the ironwood after the war. He came back to a property that had been stripped of its cattle, its working hands, and most of its visible value, stripped cleanly by someone who knew exactly what to take and what to leave. What was left was the structure, the deed and the water rights, which could not be physically removed, only legally contested. It took Eli 4 years to understand what he had come back to. Another 2 to begin rebuilding quietly enough that the rebuilding would not draw the wrong attention before he was ready. Carver was retained 3 years ago. The plan has been deliberate and slow, the way plans have to be when the opposition controls the local infrastructure and you have no allies inside the town's power structure. The appearance of ruin is not neglect. It is armor. Nora listens to all of it without interrupting. She looks at Carver, then at Eli, who is sitting at the far end of the table with his forearms on the wood and his eyes on the middle distance, not avoiding her, but not watching her absorb it either, giving her the information and the space to do with it what she will. When Carver finishes, the kitchen is quiet for a long moment. The counterfiling, she says. What does it require? Carver looks at her with the mild surprise of a man who expected a different first question. He explains, a notarial certification from the original registering office in Austin, confirming that the 1861 stamp on the deed was properly administered. The document exists. It is in the Austin Records Office. It needs to be retrieved, authenticated, and filed with the county court before the intimations response window closes. How long is the window? She asks. 3 weeks from this past Friday, Carver says. Nora counts backward. 17 days. She looks at Eli. He looks back at her with the expression she has come to know best. The one that gives nothing away on the surface, while the amber-brown eyes do something more complicated underneath. She does not ask him why he finally decided to tell her. She suspects the answer is sitting somewhere in the conversation they had in this same kitchen 2 weeks ago, in the way she laid out the Cartorio figures without flinching, and he closed a door on her that he may have been deciding since then whether to reopen. She does not need him to say it. She has the information now. That is what matters. The message comes on a Wednesday evening. Walt is in the barn, supposedly checking on the water supply to the east trough. Nora is at the side table off the kitchen, sorting the week's correspondence, invoices, a land surveyor's notice, a letter for Eli from Carver's office. She is stacking them by category when a folded note slides out from between 2 invoices. It is not sealed. It is written in a hand she does not recognize, on paper that is not the ironwood's. She opens it without thinking, the way a person opens any piece of correspondence in a pile that belongs to the household. She reads it once. Then she sits very still. It is addressed to no one. It is signed with nothing but a mark, 2 initials she does not recognize. The body of it is brief. A report of the counter-filing strategy, including the specific document Carver intends to retrieve from Austin, the timeline of the response window, and a note about the lawyer's planned travel date, details that are not public, details that could only have come from inside the ironwood, from someone present for conversations that happened behind closed doors. The paper is folded in a way that suggests it was prepared for delivery, not written and discarded, but written and waiting. She folds it back exactly as she found it. She sits at the side table and looks at the barn through the window. The lamp inside it is visible through the gap in the doors. Walt's shadow moves across the light in the unhurried way of a man finishing a task. She thinks about the warnings he has offered her. She thinks about the way he knew about the legal challenge before the town did. She thinks about every piece of information she has mentioned in passing in the 2.5 weeks she has lived here. The practicalities of the supply order, the schedule of Carver's visits, the details of the kitchen conversations she assumed were private. She thinks about a man approaching 50 with no property, no family and no future, that does not depend on remaining employed somewhere, and the particular vulnerability that creates when someone offers an alternative. She is not angry at Walt Briggs. What she feels is colder and more deliberate than anger. It is the feeling of a lock turning. She tells Eli that night. She waits until Walt has gone to the bunkhouse, and the yard is quiet and the lamp in the kitchen is the only light moving in the ironwood. She sets the note on the table in front of Eli without preamble. He reads it. He reads it again. He sets it flat on the table with 2 fingers and does not move for a long moment. She watches his face and sees, in the line of his jaw, in the way his hand flattens against the paper, something that is not surprise so much as recognition. The particular expression of a man confirming something he has been refusing to suspect. "How long do you think?" she asks. "Long enough," he says. His voice is quiet and even, and carries the weight of a man who has just answered a question that cost him something. He was going to let Hargrove know the filing date, she says, the document Carver needs. Hargrove could move to challenge its authentication before it reaches the court. Eli nods once. He stands, picks up the note and folds it into his coat pocket. In the morning, before the sun has fully cleared the eastern hills, Walt Briggs is dismissed. There is no scene. Eli calls him to the yard, says what needs to be said in the flat. Final way he says everything that is decided, and Walt Briggs packs his belongings and is gone from the ironwood before Nora has finished the breakfast she makes for 2 instead of 3. She does not watch him go. She keeps her eyes on the stove. What she is thinking about is Carver's timeline, and the 17 days that are now 14. She goes to Eli at midday. He is at the east fence, the section closest to the valley floor, where the land begins to show what it actually is beneath the surface neglect. The soil darker and richer, and the grass growing with a depth that tells a different story than the approach road. She walks out to him across the hard ground, and he hears her coming and turns before she reaches him. She stops a few feet away. The wind off the hills moves between them, carrying the dry sweetness of sun-warmed grass. She tells him she has been back to the cartorio. She tells him she has read the specific language of Hargrove's challenge and understands what it targets. She tells him she knows the response window, the document needed, and the registering office in Austin that holds it. He watches her while she speaks. He does not interrupt. "I can go to Austin," she says, "before Carver. I can go myself and retrieve the certification and have it in hand before Hargrove knows the counterfiling is moving. It removes the risk of him interfering with Carver's retrieval." Eli is quiet for a long moment. The fence post he was checking stands between them, the wire running away from it in both directions along the valley. "That is a 4-day ride," he says. "Alone." "I'm aware," she says. He looks at her with that complete, still attention. She looks back at him the same way. "Carver leaves in 5 days," she says. "If you send me now, I arrive first. The document is already public record. I have the right to request a certified copy. Carver can file it when he arrives and confirm the chain of custody." Another silence. Longer this time. "Why?" he says. Not dismissively. The question is genuine. The same question she asked herself at the end of the road 2 weeks ago, walking back toward a ranch that was not hers. She considers telling him about the letter to her father that she still has not finished, about the roof and the position and the practical arithmetic of her situation. All of it is true. None of it is the complete answer. "Because Hargrove had Roy Pelham humiliate me in the middle of that road," she says, "and I do not intend to let the same man win here." Eli looks at her for a moment longer. Something shifts in the amber-brown eyes, not dramatically, not with any announcement. Just a door that was closed, opening the width of 1 careful inch. "I will send a rider with you," he says, "not to manage you, for the road." She nods. That is fair. She turns back toward the house. Behind her, she hears him resume his work on the fence, the steady, deliberate sound of a man continuing what he was doing, which is itself a kind of answer. Not effusive, not grateful in any way that requires acknowledgement. Just the quiet continuation of a man who has decided to trust a decision he did not make alone. She has 4 days to prepare. She begins that afternoon. She pulls out the cartorio notes she made on her own paper, cross-references them with what Carver explained, and writes a clean list of exactly what she will need to request from the Austin Records office and in what form. She folds the list into her traveling bag, alongside the unfinished letter to her father, which she finally completes that evening by lamplight, with news that for the first time in months does not require careful softening. She tells Gareth Voss that she has found a situation, that it is real and solid and not without difficulty, but that it is hers, that she will write again from Austin in a week's time, that he should not worry. She seals the letter and sets it on the outgoing stack for the morning post. Outside, the Texas night settles over the ironwood in its usual absolute way. No sound from the road, no light from the direction of Crestfall, just the wide, dark sky and the dry wind moving through the valley grass. The ranch looks from the outside exactly as it has always looked, abandoned, deteriorating, not worth the trouble. Nora Voss knows better than that now, and in 5 days, so will the court in Austin. 3 weeks pass between Austin and the Crestfall auction. They are not easy weeks. They are the weeks of a ranch running short-handed, with Walt Briggs gone, and the legal pressure building from the direction of town like a weather system that has not yet broken. Nora returns from Austin on the 6th day with a rider who does not speak much, and a leather document case tucked inside her traveling bag that she does not let out of her direct possession for the entire return journey. She gives it to Carver the morning after she arrives. He examines the certification, checks the seal, and looks at her over the top of his spectacles with the expression of a man revising an earlier assessment. He leaves for Austin 2 days later to file the counterclaim before the window closes. The document is in hand. The chain of custody is clean. The response will be on the court record before Hargrove's attorney can maneuver against it. What Carver tells Nora before he rides out is that the Hargrove filing will likely reach its public moment at the Crestfall autumn auction, the largest gathering of the year, where land dealings and contracts are traditionally announced and witnessed by the community. Hargrove, he says, is the kind of man who prefers a public stage. He will want the town present when he declares the water rights secured. The announcement will be designed to move faster than any legal correction can follow publicly, even if the correction already exists on paper in Austin. Nora listens to this. She thanks Carver. She goes back inside. She spends the following 2 weeks at the cartorio, not every day, but enough. She requests certified copies of the original deed, the water rights attachment, and the 1861 notarial confirmation she retrieved from Austin. She has them authenticated by the cartorio clerk, with the methodical patience of someone building something that needs to hold weight. She does not tell Eli the full extent of what she is preparing. He is aware she is working. He does not ask the specifics, which by now she understands is not indifference, but a form of trust she has had to earn the hard way. The auction is on a Saturday in mid-October. Crestfall on auction day is a different animal than Crestfall on an ordinary morning. The road is full by 8. Wagons from outlying properties line both sides of the main street, from the feed merchant all the way to the hotel. Families in their better clothes move between the stock pens and the open-sided tent where the auction takes place, the whole event carrying the particular energy of a town that uses commerce as an occasion for everything else. News, alliances, grievances aired and settled, the slow machinery of community grinding forward another season. Nora arrives before Eli as planned. She wears her best dress, which is not remarkable. Dark wool, plain collar, nothing that invites particular attention. She carries the document case under her arm and moves through the crowd with the unhurried purpose of someone who has a specific destination and knows exactly where it is. She locates Carver near the back of the auction tent, where he has positioned himself beside a man she does not know. A county official from the district land office, Carver tells her quietly, invited at his request. The man has authority to confirm the validity of registered documents on site. She opens the case and shows Carver what she has prepared. He goes still for a moment. Then he looks at her with the full attention of a man who has stopped being surprised by her and is now simply paying respect to something he recognizes. "This is thorough," he says. "It needs to be," she says. Hargrove makes his move at 10:30. The main auction business has been running for 2 hours. Cattle lots, equipment, a parcel of land on the south end of the valley, changing hands with the usual public ceremony. The crowd is settled and attentive, the way crowds get when they have been given something to watch and are waiting for the next thing. Hargrove steps forward between lots. He is practiced at this. He has the ease of a man who has done it before and expects the room to organize itself around his presence. He thanks the auctioneer, acknowledges the assembled community with the language of a man who considers himself its custodian, and then delivers the announcement with the measured satisfaction of someone who has been holding it for a long time. The Hargrove family, he says, has completed the acquisition of the water rights for the Crestfall Valley, pending final legal confirmation. The documentation is in order. The arrangement benefits the entire community and positions the valley for the economic development it deserves. He does not mention Eli Cade. He does not mention the ironwood. He speaks as though the matter is already concluded. The crowd murmurs. Men exchange glances. Several faces turn toward the back of the tent, where Eli Cade's presence or absence is suddenly the most relevant information in the room. Nora is already moving. She does not run. She walks forward through the standing crowd with the same deliberateness she used coming off the stagecoach platform 6 weeks ago, and she is aware of the faces turning as she moves, aware of the space opening slightly ahead of her as people register her direction and step aside. She stops at the front of the tent 6 feet from Hargrove, and she speaks clearly enough that the back row can hear. "Those documents are fraudulent," she says. "The water rights listed in the Hargrove filing were never legally transferred. The original deed and water rights for the ironwood remain registered and valid. with a notarial certification on file with the Austin District Court as of 11 days ago. Hargrove turns. He looks at her with the particular expression of a man who has been interrupted and is deciding, in real time, how to manage the interruption. He almost smiles. "Miss Voss," he says with the patient tone of a man speaking to someone he considers easily dismissed, "I understand your position at the Ironwood gives you a personal interest in this matter, but a housekeeper's opinion is not a legal document." He says housekeeper the way a man uses a word as a door, something to close the conversation behind. The crowd shifts. Some faces are uncomfortable, some are calculating. Nora opens the document case. She takes out the first document, the certified copy of the original deed, and holds it out to the county official Carver has positioned near the front. "This is the registered deed for the Ironwood, certified by the Crestfall Cartorio," she says. "The acreage and water rights are attached on page 3. The registration date is 1861. She takes out the second document. "This is the notarial certification from the Austin District Records Office confirming the validity of the original stamp. Retrieved in person and authenticated 11 days ago." She takes out the third. "This is a certified copy of the counterfiling submitted to the county court by Attorney Carver of Austin, currently on the court record, contesting the Hargrove claim on the basis of fraudulent documentation." She sets all three on the auctioneer's table, where the entire tent can see them. Hargrove's expression has changed. Not collapsed. He is too practiced for that. But the architecture of his confidence has shifted in a way that is visible to anyone watching closely. His eyes move from the documents to Carver, who has stepped forward and is speaking quietly to the county official, who is examining the papers with the focused attention of a man doing his job. "The documents this woman has presented," Hargrove says, addressing the crowd rather than Nora, his voice carrying the smooth authority of a man trying to recover a room, "are unverified and represent only one party's—" "They are verified," the county official says without looking up. The tent goes quiet in the way that crowds go quiet when something has just happened that cannot be taken back. Hargrove looks at the official. He looks at Carver. He looks at the documents on the auctioneer's table. He looks finally at Nora Voss, who is standing with her hands at her sides and her eyes on him without expression. He has nothing left to aim at her that will land. The sheriff is present. He has been present since the start of the auction, positioned near the south entrance with the particular stillness of a man waiting to be useful to the right person. He starts to move forward, and for a moment the crowd reads it as an intervention in Nora's direction. "Sheriff." The voice comes from behind her, and she knows it before she turns. Eli Cade stands at the back of the tent. He has arrived quietly, without announcement, in the way he does everything. He is looking at the sheriff with the flat, direct attention of a man who has been patient for 9 years and is no longer required to be. "Those documents have been authenticated by a district official," Eli says. "Any action against the Ironwood or its people taken from this point forward will be conducted in full view of the county court." He is not loud. He does not need to be. The tent has the kind of stillness that amplifies a quiet voice. The sheriff stops. He looks at Hargrove. Hargrove gives him nothing. There is nothing left to give. No authority that has not just been publicly dismantled in front of the assembled community of Crestfall. The sheriff looks at the county official, who is still examining the documents with the calm absorption of a man who is already composing his report. The sheriff steps back. Eli walks forward through the crowd. People move. He passes through them the way a current moves through water. Not forceful, just inevitable. He stops beside Nora at the front of the tent. Not in front of her, not behind her, and turns to face the same direction she is facing. He does not look at her. He does not need to. The community of Crestfall, which has watched this family operate with unchallenged authority for 2 generations, is looking at the two of them, standing together in front of the auctioneer's table and performing the kind of quiet, rapid recalculation that small towns do when the weight in the room shifts for the first time in living memory. Roy Pelham is in the crowd near the east side of the tent. Nora sees him register what has happened, sees the moment the calculation behind his eyes reaches its conclusion, and watches him begin to move toward the exit with the careful lack of hurry of a man who would prefer not to be remembered as having been present. Hargrove says something, she does not catch it, it does not matter. The county official finishes his examination and straightens up and addresses the assembled crowd in the flat, professional tone of someone delivering a finding rather than an opinion. The documents presented by Miss Voss on behalf of the Ironwood are consistent with the registered record. The counterfiling is confirmed on the court docket. The Hargrove claim is subject to formal review on the basis of the fraudulent documentation cited therein. Nobody in the tent speaks for a moment. Then the auctioneer, a practical man who has been running these events for 12 years and has seen most things, clears his throat and announces the next lot. The auction continues. Nora picks up the document case from the auctioneer's table and closes it and holds it at her side. The crowd around them resumes its noise. The ordinary business of Crestfall on auction day reasserts itself over the extraordinary thing that just happened in the middle of it. Eli stands beside her until the space around them clears. Then he turns his head and looks at her, not with the measuring quality she has grown accustomed to, not with the closed expression of a man protecting something, but with something underneath all of that. Something that has been there long enough to have worn its own shape into him, visible now only because every careful layer above it has been stripped away by the events of the past hour. He does not say anything. She looks back at him. Outside the tent, through the open sides, the October wind moves across the Crestfall main road in long, slow waves, lifting dust from the wagon ruts and carrying it south toward the valley that the Ironwood's water rights have always legally fed. The consequences arrive the way consequences do in 1873, not all at once, but in a series of slow, irreversible steps that reshape the landscape so gradually that one morning you look up and the old configuration is simply gone. The formal review of the Hargrove claim opens in the Austin District Court 17 days after the auction. Carver rides south to represent the Ironwood's interests with the authenticated documents Nora prepared, the county officials' on-site finding, and a deposition from the cartorio clerk confirming the chain of custody. The process will take months. Carver says this plainly and without apology. The law in 1873 does not move for anyone's convenience. But the outcome, he says, is not in serious doubt. The fraudulent documentation is on the record. The original deed is on the record. What remains is procedure. Hargrove does not leave Crestfall. He is not the kind of man who leaves, but the quality of his presence in the town shifts in the weeks following the auction in ways that are difficult to name precisely and impossible to miss. The conversations he enters shorten. The men who used to gather outside the land office when he passed now find reasons to be elsewhere. The sheriff, who submitted his resignation to the county board 3 weeks after the auction, is replaced by an interim appointment from the district, a man who has no history with the Hargrove family and no debts to service in their direction. Pelham leaves Crestfall before the first frost. No announcement. The boarding house room he occupied is simply vacant one morning, and the woman who runs it tells anyone who asks that he settled his account in full and gave no forwarding information. It is the cleanest exit available to a man who has run out of uses to the people who employed him. The town does not forgive Hargrove. It does not confront him either. It does something more permanent. It simply reroutes around him, the way water reroutes around an obstacle that has stopped being a source. November comes to the Texas Panhandle without ceremony, the way it always does. One morning the air has a different quality to it, sharper and more direct, and the light sits differently on the valley floor, and you know the season has changed, not because anything dramatic happened, but because the land itself has shifted its posture. The Ironwood shifts too. With Walt Briggs gone and the legal situation moving toward resolution, Eli takes on 2 new hands, younger men, quiet and capable, who come recommended by a rancher 2 valleys over, and who arrive at the Ironwood without the weight of old loyalties. The work of the ranch, which has been running at the edge of its capacity for months, begins to breathe again. The east fence is properly reset for the first time in years. The outbuilding south of the barn, which spent the better part of a decade serving as a concealed document room, is cleaned out and returned to its original purpose as a tool store. Nora watches all of this from the rhythm of her own work, which has expanded without anyone declaring that it has expanded. She is not only cooking and managing the household, she is tracking the supply ledgers with a precision that Eli's previous system lacked. corresponding with Carver on the administrative details of the legal proceedings, and, in the hours between supper and dark, working through the valley's water distribution records that Carver left behind, building a clear picture of what the Ironwood's rights actually mean for the surrounding properties and what a fair arrangement might look like when the legal question is finally settled. She does this because it needs doing and because she is capable of doing it. She does not announce it. She simply does it, the way she has done everything since she stepped off the stagecoach with a worn leather bag and a father to think about. Speaking of which, she writes to Gareth Voss every 2 weeks now. The letters from Austin are longer than the ones from before, fuller, more specific, less careful about disguising difficulty as optimism. She tells him about the auction. She tells him about the counterfiling. She tells him, in plain language, that her situation at the Ironwood is stable, and that the stability appears to be of the lasting kind. His reply arrives in the 3rd week of November. It is shorter than her letters because Gareth Voss has always been more comfortable with a hammer than a pen, but it says what it needs to say. He is well. His hand has improved enough for light work. A former customer has offered him a part-time position assessing metalwork at a salvage operation near the St. Louis rail yard. He does not need her to worry about him. He says he is glad she found something real. She reads it twice at the kitchen table in the thin winter light, then folds it and puts it with the others she keeps in the back of the traveling bag, the bag that has not moved from its place under the cot since she arrived, which is itself a kind of answer to a question neither she nor Eli has yet asked out loud. It is the hotel keeper who tells her. She's in Crestfall on a Thursday for the weekly supply order, and he stops her outside the general store with the careful manner of a man delivering information he considers both important and slightly outside his jurisdiction. He says that a document was filed at the cartorio 2 days ago. He says she may want to take a look at it when she has a moment. She goes directly. The cartorio clerk pulls the filing without being asked. He has the expression of a man who has been waiting for this particular visit. The document is a deed amendment, filed under E.R. Cade. It amends the ownership listing of the Ironwood Ranch and its attached water rights to include a second party. The second name on the deed is Nora Voss. She stands at the records desk and reads it twice. Then she reads the filing date, 4 days ago, which means it was filed while she was at the Ironwood, while she was going about the ordinary work of the day, while Eli was doing whatever Eli was doing in the way he does everything, which is to say, quietly and without announcement and entirely on his own terms. She puts the document down on the desk. She looks at the clerk, who is doing his best to appear absorbed in something else. She rides back to the Ironwood. She finds Eli at the north fence, the same stretch of line he was working when she walked out to propose the Austin trip 3 weeks ago. He hears her coming and turns before she reaches him, the way he always does. She stops. The wind off the hills is cold now, carrying the dry scent of approaching winter, and the valley below them is the amber and brown of late season, the grass lying flat in the direction of the prevailing current. "You filed an amendment," she says. He looks at her. He does not look away. "You should have told me," she says, "before you did it." He is quiet for a moment. Then he says, "If I had told you first, you would have argued." She looks at him. "I would have. I know," he says. She lets the silence sit for a moment. The fence wire runs away from them in both directions along the valley, marking the edge of something that is now, on paper, in the Austin District Court record, in the Crestfall cartorio ledger, as much hers as his. "You earned it before you knew there was anything to earn," he says. It is the longest sentence he has offered her without practical necessity, and it comes out with the particular quality of words that have been held a long time and are finally being set down. She looks at the valley below them, at the land she has been learning for 2 months, its rhythms, its demands, its genuine depth beneath the surface of deliberate neglect, at the property that someone tried to take apart from the outside and hollow from within, and that is still standing, because of a series of decisions made by 2 people who came to each other sideways and arrived somewhere neither of them planned. She thinks of Gareth Voss in St. Louis, with his improving hand and his part-time work, and his letter that said he was glad she found something real. She has found something real. "Next time," she says, Tell me first. Eli looks at her for a moment. Something in the amber-brown eyes settles, not for the first time but differently than before, with a permanence that earlier moments did not have. He turns back to the fence and resumes his work. She stands beside him for a while in the cold November air, looking out over the valley before she turns back toward the house. Winter arrives, and the ironwood receives it without apology. The ranch runs through the cold months with a steadiness that feels earned rather than accidental. Two people who have learned each other's silences and can now read the difference between the ones that require a response and the ones that simply need to be shared. Eli still does not explain himself in words when actions will do. Nora still does not soften information to make it easier to receive. They argue twice before Christmas, genuinely about real things, about the spring supply order, and about a decision regarding the east pasture that they eventually resolve by both being partly right. It is the kind of resolution that takes longer than a quick answer would, and is worth more because of it. The Hargrove case moves through the Austin court at the pace the law sets for itself. By February, the fraudulent documentation is formally entered into the record. By March, the water rights challenge is dismissed. Hargrove's attorneys file a counter-argument that Carver addresses without drama. The Ironwood's position is not in question. It is simply a matter of waiting for the court to confirm in writing what the record has shown since the first filing. Douglas Hargrove does not recover his standing in Crestfall, not because the town turns against him in any dramatic fashion, but because influence in a frontier town runs on the expectation of winning, and he lost publicly in front of witnesses on the most important piece of ground he had ever contested. The families that structured their commercial relationships around his position begin to structure them around something else. The something else, by spring, increasingly involves the ironwood. The stranger arrives on a Tuesday afternoon in late March. Nora sees him from the kitchen window before he reaches the gate, a man in a dark coat and a hat that belongs to the eastern cities, riding a horse that is too well kept for a casual traveler. He moves with the purpose of someone who has a specific destination and has already decided how the conversation will go when he reaches it. Eli is in the yard. She watches the man dismount and introduce himself. She watches Eli's posture, the way it does not change but sharpens, the way a man's stillness sharpens when he has received information that requires his complete attention. She dries her hands and goes to the door. The stranger is representing a group of investors from the eastern states. He says so plainly, with the smooth professionalism of a man who has delivered this introduction many times. The group has an interest in water access along the Texas Interior Valley system as the railroad expands westward. The Ironwood's rights are known to them. The offer, he says, is substantial. He produces a letter of introduction and holds it out to Eli. Eli takes it. He reads it. His expression does not change. But Nora, standing in the doorway 10 feet away, watches his hand tighten once, briefly, on the paper before it relaxes. She crosses the yard. Eli holds the letter out to her without a word. She takes it. The letter is on the letterhead of a land investment firm in New York. The language is formal and precise. The offer is detailed, and at the bottom, in the closing paragraph, beneath the investor group's stated interest in the valley's water infrastructure, is a single sentence that has nothing to do with water rights or railroad development. It says that the group's founding partner had prior dealings with Robert Cade in the autumn of 1863, months before Robert Cade's recorded death at the Red River crossing, and that certain records from that period may be of interest to his surviving heir. Nora looks up from the letter. Eli is looking at the stranger with the absolute stillness of a man who has just heard a door open that he believed had been sealed for 9 years. The afternoon light lies flat and cold across the Ironwood yard. The valley stretches out below the fence line, patient and unchanged. The wind moves through the dry winter grass in long, slow currents, carrying nothing from the direction of Crestfall and everything from the direction of the open country to the north. Whatever Robert Cade's death actually was, whatever the autumn of 1863 contained that the official record does not, it is no longer the past. It has just ridden up to the Ironwood gate on a well-kept horse and handed them a letter.